Yar! Welcome back to the cringe. We are about to buy a Nook Miles ticket so we can go visit an island. So this is the start of an island tours video. Thank you for tuning in. All right, a Nook Miles ticket. Yay. Okay. No. Boy, it's moving slow today. Yep. So we just got finished shooting a different video. Yeah, so I usually do the island tours and the daily chores all at the same time. Then I run it through Davinci Resolve, the free version, to correct some, cleans up the video a little bit, improves the sound quality. Well, as best as I can. And so that's what we're going to do. So that's how I typically do it. And then I upload it to YouTube. Time for takeoff. Sorry, that's my microphone. I'm sitting back a little bit. Yeah, so that's typically what I do. Then when I get those finished and upload those, then I start the whatever second video I'm going to do, or third. So if I have another series, I usually do that one. So I'm done by 9 o'clock. And all I'm doing is just processing videos at that point. A lot of people process that stuff overnight. I do not want that flower. Yay, apparently I'm going to have it. I don't have that kind of content. Like, for instance, I heard the Rad Brad on his channel mention. We're going to build a shovel here. Yeah, so I heard the Rad Brad usually records his videos and then processes them overnight. And, my videos aren't as long as his, so I usually do mine. Like the daily chores one I'm going to do as soon as I'm done with this video. I had an intro and an exit. And then improve the sound quality a little bit. And I use the free version of Davinci, so. Why am I keep on pulling flowers? So we're going to dump these. Right here. I do not want flowers. Drop. And drop. Man, I have a case of the yawns. Eat. Sorry, guys, I'm not trying to yawn, so if you hear it, I apologize. Just hit me as I was going through the stream. Didn't hit me on the other one. Hit me on this one. Told you get good quality content from me. All right. You know what? Did I? Yeah, I did. Okay. So here we go. Let's start knocking this down. Yeah, you get good quality content from me. I don't yawn. I'm professional. I don't make typos or, you know, verbal snafus. You know what I find is interesting is I never realized that my S's kind of sound sharp until I started recording videos. And it's interesting, like I can't record a video. If I talk with my headphones on, I talk in patterns because I'm listening to myself as I'm talking. So it's really hard to separate that. So you tend to talk in rhythmic patterns. So so I usually, my first video is I start the video with talking with that on. Oh, nice. So I'll do that before I leave. I'll make new ones. So I'll usually start the video that way, and then by like 5 minutes into the video, I have to take the headphones off because I just can't get through it like that. Yep. Yeah, so that's what happens behind the scenes. I'm usually up by 4:30 on a regular basis. Every once in a while, I'll sleep in. Like if I work hard, the night before, like if I volunteer a lot, you might see me sleep in and I'll produce a video later. But that's not what I typically do. Yeah. Yeah, it was a rough week, and if you've followed my videos, you'll understand why. I talked about it in the last two daily chores. I don't really want to get into it because I'm kind of moving beyond it, but it was pretty painful. Long story short is I had to go to court on behalf of my son. I'm the guardian of my son. My son is an adult with developmental challenges, and he was hurt by a staff member. And it wasn't a kind hurt or you know, it was physical. It was a physical thing. Um, and it was for unnecessary things, right? Uh, you know, so the issue was unnecessary. Uh-oh. No, 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 no. See if I can catch him. Darn it. Okay, I'm going to go back to that weak pattern where I wasn't able to catch the bees in time. Or the wasps. So let's see if I have that. Yeah. So in a situation, so I had to write a victim's impact statement and speak on behalf of my child. And when I say child, he's an adult. But but he has child level functioning. So he's kind of like somewhere between a toddler and first grade functioning level. And this happened back in early part of the year, but it just finally became a court case in May, and then this was sentencing. So I'll leave that. I'm not going to take that with me. Drop item. There we go. Yeah, so it took 2.5 months. So there were 4 counts of abuse that day, and it was physical abuse. So there were 4 counts. The gentleman hurt my son 4 times. And so and I'll be honest, while I don't like the fact that this happened, one of the things I could kind of understand, the guy just did it in an aggressive manner, and my son hurt him, so like he hurt his head. So I'll make that when I leave. There we go. Cool. Cicada shell. I got to remember to take that to Blathy. So I got to make an axe, and I got to make a net before I leave. Yeah, so one of the issues, I could kind of see as a necessity. As a dad, I could understand it, and as as a sailor, I could kind of understand. But there were 3 other things. So he did 4 things. There were 4 charges. He took a plea deal and only pleaded to one of them. And I understand that. I'm not here to debate that. So he pleaded to the most serious charge. So I'm okay with what happened, with how it was handled in the court. I'm okay with that. So there were 3 other things that I really went to go speak about. The first one, I could kind of understand, but the other 3 events, I was dumbfounded with what happened. Really disturbing stuff. And now I'm finally getting past it, right? Oh, let's double check what I need. I know I need a net. And I need an axe. Okay. So I went to go speak. I had a 4-page victims impact statement. I might actually post a video about it later. I might create a new channel, like a reaction channel, or it was pretty thorough. It went through and thanked the people that had the courage to sign their names to it. For the people that witnessed the stuff. I also think the agencies that were reporting that found elements of harm. And so I thanked those support staff. I even brought up the licensure for the state I live in because of that event, they got 2 violations. And I even brought that up. All because of somebody's behavior. So, yeah, so it was a rough week. That's the bottom line. I was very fortunate. I had a relative go with me to this court case. I went when he took his plea deal, right? So what happens is, you know, you have an arraignment where they tell you what your charges are, right? So you get arrested or that kind of stuff. In a case like this where there's harm to a compromised adult that needs care, there's an investigation that goes on. Hold on, let me sell this because I can't talk and chew gum. Confirm. All right, so let's fix this before I get going. Yeah, so there's an investigation that goes on. And that happens. So usually it involves the agencies that support your children. So if you have a child that has developmental challenges, you get help through like community mental health or something along those lines. So there's a social worker that acts on his behalf. And then that agency has an office of recipient rights. So they did an investigation. My son's social worker did an investigation and forwarded to the officer or the office of recipient rights. So it's so they're the same agency, but the recipient rights one is aside from. So it's kind of like the police when they do an investigation on a shooting. It's kind of like a crime or whatever, and they had to pull their weapon. I shouldn't say that. So there's an independent kind of investigation. So that's what recipient rights is. They recognize that there was harm. The Adult Protective Services recognized there were harm. And then the licensing agency for my state also reached out and asked my opinion. They contact everybody specifically. So since I'm my son's guardian, I got to, they talked to me, and which is surprising. I've never had that happen before. So there, and then the court system, the prosecutor's office also sends you a packet asking if you want to speak on somebody's behalf. And in this case, I had to send guardianship papers and that kind of stuff. And then they sent me the form to speak on my son's behalf. So it's interesting. I mean, it's an interesting process. It's one I did not want to be involved in, but, I'm not doing that. But I technically did not want to be involved in, but I'm glad I had the opportunity to speak on behalf of my loved one. And what's odd about this is that the person who did the stuff had a very good support network, had a lot of family members there that were there at the time. And it's kind of an odd feeling because me acting on my son, and they were acting to support their loved one, right? So there's two outside people in there showing support for a loved one, and we had nothing to do with it. So it was weird. It kind of felt weird. So, okay, now we're going to go see, I'm kind of going off on a little bit of a tangent, but off topic, but it's good. I use this channel for stress relief. And so, it's stressful. So I'm getting it out while I'm playing. That's why I play this game. I enjoy it. So, put away. So it was an interesting process. It was so there's an arraignment essentially, right? You get arrested. You sit in jail for X amount of time until the court sees you, right? And then the first time you're in front of the court, they arraign you, right? So that they tell you what you're being charged with. That's that process. All right. And depending on what happens next, like the charges were filed and all that stuff happened, the investigations happened. And then, so he was arraigned, he was arrested and arraigned. And then lawyers take over from that point. The prosecutor put charges. The individual goes in front of the court, hires a lawyer, or he gets appointed a lawyer by the court. And then there was a plea deal that was offered by the prosecutor's office, and the gentleman took it. So had that not happened, there would have been a couple other court cases in there, right? So when you get in front of a judge, you don't get to tell them everything right off the bat. There's a process that occurs, right? First is the arraignment. The second court case was the plea deal. And then, so there's like a status conference. There was a status conference in there. And I didn't need to show up to that one. But I did show up to when he accepted the plea deal, because I had to hear him say it. And then the last one where he gets sentenced, right? That's when you find out what's going to happen. So it kind of gives you time between that, so you can get your personal affairs in order if you need to. So it kind of works that way. But he, it was a small courthouse. We are going to eat. We're going to do 5 today. And so everything was about that gentleman first. And then the sentencing, it kind of flips, right? I was the first one that was able to speak. So I had a 4-page paper I wrote. It took me like 3 minutes to read it. It was very direct and to the point. And then I got finished with what I said, and I would put the paper away. I'm like, look, I did it in a format where I was less formal, right? And out of the 4 charges that gentleman was charged with, I was there to ensure that my son got justice on 3 of them, right? So his one charge was because of 4 incidences. And so 3 of the incidents that occurred, I was there to speak about, because one of them I could kind of see, I wasn't happy with it, but I could kind of see the necessity of it. So I even told the judge that. I'm like, if there was only one incident, I probably wouldn't be here. And I explained myself why, because I could kind of see that as a necessity, right? And I'm like, but these other 3 things I can't get past. And that's why I'm here speaking. And so I broke it down a little bit on the level, after saying what I had to say. So it's pretty interesting. It's an interesting process. But what I'm trying to get at is that it's a process that you recover from. Some people may not feel the need to recover, but it's emotional. Ooh, I got the ironwood bed. Sweet. Oh my goodness, I almost have that whole set. Let's go back into here. I want to see this. Nice. See, this even has storage underneath. Sweet. I'm only waiting for like a cutting board now before I can make the good stuff. Nice. Yeah, so getting back to that, it's an emotional process. And for the families like myself, because I'm there speaking on behalf of somebody else, and the other family members, you know, they didn't create the problem, right? We're there supporting people that we care about, but the victim's family doesn't get to speak, right? It's, if they're called as witnesses, they do, but like in this case, my son is not able to speak for himself. So I, being his guardian, got to speak on his behalf. And then the lawyers got an opportunity to speak. The defense attorney disagreed with some of the things I've said, and I'm like, I don't care if he disagrees with me or not. Right? It's kind of silly, you know. And that's the only part. I don't think the defense attorney should have contradicted what I said. He contradicted a few points I made, and I was like, you know, so that's why I feel a little weird, because I didn't get a chance to fully respond to those kind of comments and feel a little worse on some stuff. But, oh, cool. So I already turned that in. I think I have that. So it's a weird process. The prosecutor got up. He applied for a couple things, and the prosecutor was like, I don't want to see that. Yeah. And I did not want to see that. Right. If you're under a certain age, you can apply for like a deferral. And since this young man was working with compromised individuals like my son, I did not want to see that deferral because the charges were pretty serious. And, you know, it involved physical abuse. So I was not happy with that request, and I made it publicly known. So that's fine. But then the judge comes in after all of that. The judge comes in and addresses both sides. And he was blunt, right? And so that was interesting. It was interesting to see that process play out where I'm involved in it. Because you can watch the videos on YouTube. Not mine, not this case, but you can watch videos on YouTube and see how a court process works. But until you actually experience it, it's pretty rough. And so, you know, I play Animal Crossing as a stress relief in that sense. So, and I appreciate you guys listening if you stick around. But that whole process is weird and interesting at the same time. Because justice, when we talk about justice, it's not always perfect, right? Even when you get what you want, it still doesn't feel right. Right? I asked the gentleman to serve some jail time. I did. And he deserved to. He should have had more in my eyes. But I didn't ask for the max penalty. I asked for probation and jail. So a mixture of both, because I think if you commit a crime where it involves physical abuse of another, I think you have to learn that lesson the hard way a little bit, right? You don't get to hurt people and just walk away and be fine. Like, ooh, I got probation, yay. You know, I don't think that's appropriate in this case. And the judge agreed with me. So the gentleman ended up getting 60 days in jail. He got credit for 2 because he was already in jail for 2 days, because that's before his arraignment. He spent 2 days in jail. So he was arrested by Adult Protective Services, an officer. And then he spent 2 days in jail. So the judge gave him credit for those 2 days, which I understand. I you know, I'm not unhuman or inhumane, you know. So I asked that he serve jail time for the fact that I think some punishments have to be felt in order to sink in. And this was a person probably in his early 20s. I'm going to make an assumption on that. Ooh, nice. I wish it kind of had an opportunity to figure out which one they were. The gyroids. That's not what I wanted. There we go. So the judge agreed. He gave him 60 days credit to, because he already spent those in jail. And he gave him the longest probation period he could give them by order by the law of, for the statute of the crime. So he was given 2 years probation, and then he had to pay a plethora of fees. Oh, yeah. So I'm going to make another one before I leave. The axe is the only one that I actually make the strongest, because you can cut down trees and all that kind of stuff. And you get your the max load of wood. So that's why I do that one. But I don't do it for the other stuff. I don't do it for the shovels and that kind of stuff. I'm going to go and get that. That looks like a moray. So yeah, after it's all said and done, ooh. After it's all said and done, like, we were escorted out of the courtroom pretty quick. In the defense's eyes, we kind of got a win, so we got to walk out first. And they gave him the opportunity. They gave his family the opportunity to say some stuff, and for closure. So the way the judge did it, we didn't think he was going to get any jail time. And let's be honest, he deserved jail for what he did. I'm not going to tell you why, but it was enough that it was odd. And yeah, but thanks for listening. I appreciate that. But that process is long and drawn out. I'm starting to feel better about it, right? Because the first day is shock and kind of, it's bittersweet, right? You got what you wanted, but it still came at the cost of your son or daughter getting hurt, or somebody you care about. And his family feels the same way. They had no control over what he did, right? Just like I didn't have control over what happened to my son. So it's a weird position to be in. And I'm talking about it, because it helps me process, and that if any of my listeners, need to reach out to me, I'm okay with that. But the other thing is that you kind of understand when you go in there, because if you're a victim of a crime, most of the time you want an eye for an eye, right? We all want, we're all gruff and, but not everything gets solved that way, right? Oh, I forgot about the visitor at the, nice. Totally forgot about that. This was this gentleman's first issue. With the law. But what he did was so severe, he got 4 charges, right? Like I said, as a parent, I could possibly understand one of them. But at the same token, you know, I would have been bothered if he just got probation, because the charges were pretty bad. And it wasn't, oh, cool. I love that part. And when I say the charges were bad, they were serious. It bothered me for a long time. So there was so it happened sometime in the beginning of the year, the second month of the year in February. So he was arraigned. So he was arrested in March, arraigned a couple days later, right? So he spent 2 days in jail. He was arraigned. And then, right, a month after that, ooh, another horse. Yeah. So a month later, he you know, there was a status. There wasn't a right. So after you get arraigned, you talk to you essentially, it gives you time to talk to a lawyer, get all that stuff. If he didn't hire his lawyer, right? So next comes a status conference, right? That's where the people talk and you find out if he got representation or not, or does he need a signed representation? So that's like the third step, right? So it gives people time to get things in order to help. And that's where the prosecutor, lets them know if there's going to be a plea deal, and they kind of talk real quick. The next one is where the plea deal was offered and the gentleman accepted. And so that one, I didn't get an opportunity to speak. So I did not get an opportunity to speak. And it was hard to watch because everything was about him, right? Right. He wanted to make sure all of his ducks were in a row. He got a plea deal. He had to take time to talk about his lawyer. My son didn't even get mentioned. The only time my son got mentioned was when the judge had to ask him facts about why, because when you accept a plea deal, the judge goes through the charges and said, did you do this? Or did you do something like this? And he does it in a way that the person admits it for the court so they can accept the charges, right? He doesn't talk about everything, but he does it in a way that that's the bubbleoid. So that's the one I have. I need to go bury one. And that's when he accepts the plea. So it was never about me, right? His family, they were the ones that got to walk out of the courtroom first. Me as the father, I was left feeling like crap because it didn't look like justice was being served, right? So it was all about his wishes for the plea deal, right? He stopped the court case, got to talk to his lawyer. His lawyer was like, I'm going to submit so he can get out of jail and get probation, right? Because there's a law in the state I live in where if you're under a certain age, you can have something expunged off your record. I was like, absolutely no way, right? But I didn't get that opportunity to talk, right? So everything was about him. So right now it felt lopsided. And he's the one that did everything. But the process is there for a purpose, right? If he's going to accept the plea, he needs to know what he's getting charged with, right? So that kind of stuff takes effect, right? Because he's admitting responsibility. But it still was painful. It was extremely painful because everything revolved around his family and all that kind of stuff. And my son was like an afterthought and he was the victim. So yeah, that was painful to see. But it flipped when the sentencing came, right? Everything was about what I got to say, right? And everybody got to respond to what I said, even the defense attorney. And the defense attorney, even though I didn't like what he said, he was defending his client. So So I can understand why, you know what I'm saying? Like, he kind of lessened what I said, and I was like, you know, he was like, no disrespect to this person. I was like, you know, I'm sitting here like hiding it all inside. I'm like thinking to myself, I don't really give a diddly squat of what you think. I'm not there for your opinion, right? That's my mindset, right? Because I'm a grown man, and you know, I have a backbone. I'm, you know, and this guy hurt my son, so I don't really care what he said. I don't care. And I recognize, so that's kind of this process. And it's painful if you're not used to it. I think I'm going to put that away. Put in storage. I'll take these. Yeah, so if you're not used to that process, it's emotional and it's draining, right? So for 2 days, I felt drained. Let's go in. I'm going to see if I could try to see some iron. Yeah, it's too less. I can't do that. So ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you hanging out with me today. Thank you for letting me vent. Thank you for coming by. If you did, I appreciate you. I will see you tomorrow with another island tour video. And for what it's worth, I appreciate you. Please feel free to leave a like, subscribe, and a comment. I do respond to every comment. I know, don't laugh, because I only have like 30 followers or 20 followers, so it's pretty easy. But, you know, I try to respond to everything, because it's important. You guys are sticking around and watching some of the stuff, so I appreciate it. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up for today. You know, get off my soapbox, and tomorrow we'll just get back to game plan. So thank you very much. You guys have a wonderful day.